Welcome to The Owl Hoot, a podcast for the environmentally curious, with me, Caroline Norbury. On each episode, I chat with a guest who contributes in some way to protecting the planet on matters of climate change, sustainability, biodiversity, and pollution. Here is a place where you can gain new knowledge and be inspired. Enjoy listening. Wayne Bexton is the Director of Environment and Sustainability at Nottingham City Council. The city has set an ambitious target to be carbon neutral by 2028 and is claiming to be the UK's greenest core city, having achieved a 58% reduction in carbon emissions per capita since 2005. With a 20-year career covering a variety of environmental roles, Wayne is well placed to lead in driving green change within the city. I'm delighted to have him on the podcast to share the strategies, success stories and difficulties in meeting the current environmental challenges whilst supporting local people. Welcome, Wayne, to the podcast.
Hi, Caroline. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, and me too. So just to get us going and to give a bit of a sense of who you are, I can see that you've had this long career, not to make you feel too old, but they're in and around the environment area. What was it about your background that led you to have a career in this sort of environmental realm?
Yeah, really good question. And I guess, it starts out for me, Caroline, really with having with family. So both my sets of grandparents were farmers. And so coming from a farming background, that very early interest in nature and the natural environment was embedded, and from then on, really, just anything from an environmental perspective I was passionate about, and that led me on to an environmental degree, as you can imagine. And I think the kind of other impact on people was also a key driver for me, and you can see the rest really, as it led into firstly an advisor in the private sector, advising big business on how they could limit their impact on the environment or improve their impact and certainly comply with legislative requirements, and then into the public sector. I've been in the public sector probably nearly 20 years now. So, and that's been around working to deliver those outputs for residents, but make sure that sustainable practices were being led by the public sector wherever I've done that. So yeah, really kind of a journey, and always wanted to work and deliver on my passion and ultimately make a difference.
And that's interesting that you've chosen the public sector as the main area in which you've worked within. Why is that?
I think that is genuinely the ability to have that far-reaching impact, those social outcomes in particular. The key for me, and this is something that I regularly try and reinforce with my teams, is that the environmental agenda, carbon neutral agenda, can have many impacts on a real wide portfolio of agendas. So for instance, if you were looking at retrofit of properties, which we're doing extensively in Nottingham and also across the Midlands, where I also have a remit through our Midlands Net Zero Hub, there are knock-on consequences that we're starting to see on the public purse elsewhere. So when we're improving homes, making them more efficient, making them warmer, what we've found through looking at data from GPs is that those people living in those properties are much less likely to present at doctors with respiratory issues, for instance, or illness related to a cold home. So for me, it was a real that for me is the light bulb moment where I think actually working in the public sector, you can join those portfolios to have a real wide ranging impact. And I think that's what I'm all about, innovating and trying to have a bigger impact as possible on the environment, but ultimately on people's lives.
That's interesting. You've drawn all those in, and I'm curious that you have seen the public sector as a way to to have a real broad approach, and because I always imagine, having never been working in the public sector, that you get perhaps put in a box and never never get out of your box. But it's good to hear that it's not like that. Tell me a bit about your role currently.
Yeah, so I'm currently Director of Environment and Sustainability at Nottingham. I also have two other hats. So I'm the Senior Responsible Officer for the Midlands Net Zero Hub, and there's 5 net zero hubs in England, and we cover Welsh border to East Coast, so a huge remit and a programme funded via government. And I'm also chair of the D2N2 low carbon board as well, so the Derbyshire, Derby, Nottinghamshire, Nottingham Local Enterprise Partnership Low Carbon Board, which again, based on our kind of the last remarks, is all around joining again the public and private sector to have as big an impact as possible, Caroline. So that's quite exciting. So I've got those 3 hats. Obviously, my primary function is Director of Environment and Sustainability at Nottingham City Council, and I've got a whole load of services and functions under my remit. So everything from the practical frontline delivery, so district heating, to our carbon neutral policy teams and work across that, to our work on utilities, and we're managing all the utilities accounts for the City Council and the City Council's partners, and then a whole load again of proactive innovative schemes, retrofitting of properties, delivering of things like battery storage, solar PV. We manage over 15,000 energy assets across the city, and so lots happening, all under that bigger umbrella of carbon neutrality, and working to achieve that, but also lots of different practice mixed in, whether it's statutory functions that we have to deliver, or whether it's activity that we do with other authorities where we may provide our expertise so they can benefit. So yeah, a lot happening in Nottingham, Caroline, a lot on my plate, if you like.
Yes, that is a somewhat broad and huge, quite scary amount to be covering. And I already feel like this conversation could be the next 3 hours. However, I'm going to keep it tight. Tell me then, within all that, you have this very ambitious, you talked about carbon neutrality there, you have this ambitious target 2028. And that's not that far away, and you've got all that going on. How on earth are you prioritizing? And are these the easy wins? Are these the things that are going to get you over the line? Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, really, Caroline. A really ambitious target, but rightly so. So Nottingham set the ambition of being carbon neutral by 2028. That's a citywide ambition, not just a council ambition. And the council is only responsible for, it's actually responsible for just under 3% of the emissions of the city, so a very relative small amount. So we've really got to influence, be a policy lead, and deliver big projects to make that happen. But we've gone with that ambitious target because we are the leading city in the UK for carbon reduction. So we've already seen a 58% reduction in CO2 emissions against a 2005 baseline, which is incredible, really. Great strides taken. But absolutely a lot of low-hanging fruit has been utilised to get us to that position, and we probably now need to see significant step change to get us to that marker of 2028. I think the real plus in that, Caroline, is we've done this on the back of some science-based work. So we've got our carbon neutral charter, which people can look up online. And then we've put in place a roadmap to get us there. So we've got a 270-point action plan, and those actions are monitored on a quarterly basis for how we're going to achieve carbon neutrality. And we use a platform called Climate View, which is brilliant because another passion of mine is carbon reduction is often seen as just that: stop doing things, reduce things, and it's difficult to get everybody to buy into that. The Climate View platform does the opposite. So it takes some of those reduction items and it puts them into building blocks, and suddenly you get a positive spin on, actually, we're trying to work towards something, and it steps forward as opposed to reducing. And that's quite a nice way of selling it to everybody, because this is about everybody in the city and achieving something quite significant. And Nottingham not just in the UK, but if we hit 2028, we'll be the first city to do so in Europe as well. Copenhagen, we're looking at 2025. They've since, due to issues outside their control, said no, we're not going to achieve that. And so Nottingham's really got an opportunity to make its mark and build on some real green credentials from the past, if you like. Nottingham's always been a leader on sustainability, and we've galvanised that in recent times. I think the step changes we'll need, they generally fall into kind of three broad areas with other bits bolted on. But there's domestic. We know domestic emissions are significant. We're rolling out retrofit now, using as much grant and private finance as we possibly can to thousands of properties in Nottingham. So that's got to continue, and it's really, really important that gathers pace as opposed to stays the same. So that's key. The other is commercial. So where we've got businesses, big businesses operating in the city, and I'm pleased to say we've had over 60 big businesses sign up to our We Support CN28, making their commitment to carbon neutrality by 2028 as well. And they can display that a bit like a food hygiene banner, if you like, to say we're working with the council to make this happen. So those emissions from commercial, really, really key. And of course, transport. And transport emissions, we've done a huge amount in the city. We've got the tram, we've got e-scooters, we're looking at real connectivity around sustainable transport and pedestrianisation of certain small isolated areas. And despite that, emissions have stayed pretty static from transport. So we're hoping we're going to see quite a shift as all that investment comes to bear fruit. And we've got wireless taxi charging, lots of pilots. We've delivered a UK first vehicle to grid fleet charging model, which is really tremendously exciting. That's a 1 megawatt battery that sits at our Eastcroft depot. All of our vehicles there have gone electric. All of our fleet vehicles have gone electric. When they come in at the end of the day, they plug into bi-directional chargers and it decharges the batteries. So they typically still have 20-30% charge in the batteries. That goes into that central battery, which has been topped up via solar across the depot throughout the day. That battery trades with grid, and then the vehicles charge up again through the night when it's cheapest to do so. And that kind of model is really building resilience from the grid itself and giving us that ability to offset costs, but also deliver something that has a real knock-on impact on emissions. So lots of innovations going on, lots of work to be done across those three pillars. But yeah, tremendously exciting, and obviously we're really proud to be leading that charge.
As you've said, there is a lot going on there, and I like the fact that you broke those sections down into the residential, commercial, and the transport. You need to be collaborating a lot with lots of different people, businesses, individuals, house owners. How do you, as sort of catalyze change you obviously are doing so, and I'm wondering how you've managed to because nobody wants to be told to do something differently, particularly if it might be more expensive. So how are you getting that buy-in and that collaboration?
Yeah, really good question, Caroline, and you're absolutely right. And what I generally, again, another message I try to put out there is we don't want to stop people doing things, but we want to make the choices more sustainable. So actually they've got a choice that is a sustainable option for doing what they want to do. And that's obviously not always possible. We want to make sure it is as possible as we can in the coming months and years. A couple of things we do and have had a real impact. One is we have a citywide partnership called the Green Theme Partnership. And purposely we have a business leader from the city who chairs that. We coordinate it. We have businesses, the universities, community groups, and they come together on that Green Theme Partnership with that ambition around carbon neutrality. And they all report from different organisations, different areas of the city, how they're getting on and how that's been achieved. So that's so valuable in getting buy-in and that cross-sector thinking, bringing expertise in from different quarters. But then what we've also done is we appreciate we can't reach every community with groups and think, people are obviously, maybe busy or this might not be a particular interest. What we want to do is reach out and ensure we engage with people in that way. And we've done a number of things on that basis, but probably the thing that's having the biggest impact is we've got an app. It's Green Rewards app, and basically, if people take sustainable choices and they log it on their app, they can win prizes. And that is vouchers from businesses across the city who are signed up on our We Support, or travel vouchers, or vouchers for, theatre or whatever it may be. And they can log those on the Green Rewards app, league table. People can see what impact the choices they're having are making. And that's been a real visual tool that's gathering momentum. It's up for an award actually in a couple of months. And we've done it not just in Nottingham, again, because we realise, I think, that the boundaries, the city boundaries, kind of immaterial in some respects. So this is across Nottinghamshire. So all the districts and boroughs are signed up, and we'd love it to go further afield as well, as a Green Rewards app people can really get on board and engage with. And then lots of comms out there. So our messaging, we did a consultation, Caroline, around the Broadmarsh. People know the old shopping centre, thankfully demolished, and the big message that came back, the number one message from thousands of responses, was that people want a green space in the city centre. And I'm pleased to say that's going to happen. So we have a green heart in the middle of Nottingham that's going to replace what was the old Broadmarsh site. It's coming together now, work's ongoing, and people see it if they come in via the train station. And that's going to be that green space. And I think it's a bit of a game changer, really. And I think people through COVID probably appreciated green space more. But green space linked to corridors of green space, giving that connectivity, allowing us to make sure nature can thrive even in a city setting, but also the messages and the education that will give when people come to the city, or when kids coming into the city and see there's green space. I think it's just the right type of message that we can be giving out. So the plan is that engagement carries on. We're trying to get as much of that messaging out there as we possibly can, and obviously the council have got an ambition that's front and centre. So we'll keep pushing that as much as possible.
That sounds really exciting, and I love an app, and most people love an app, don't they? How many apps can we possibly have? So that's a good way of definitely communicating. And I think you raise a very useful and interesting point there about the green space. This journey that we have to go on to get our carbon emissions down, it doesn't have to always be about a new life that's more difficult or more expensive. It has wins, and those green spaces are one of those wins, and a nicer place to live in that's better for your health. And I tie that in with the transport issue, because obviously transport is difficult within a city, and you sound like you've come at it from very many different angles. How do you reduce those carbon emissions from vehicles and get people to see that actually it's going to be a nicer place to be in? Are you there? Are you getting there? Where do you see yourself in that?
It's very difficult, and the technology needs to be there, doesn't it? So we've been rolling out charging infrastructure across Nottingham and the wider D20 actually, as far as connectivity, and trying to remove those blockers. We know we have vehicles coming into the city for a whole load of different reasons, and we don't shy away from that. We've got our new Broadmarsh car park. It is a new car park, but we've got the greatest number of chargers, EV chargers, in any car park in the UK, purposely so. So around about 100 of the bays are dedicated to EV charging. And we know that's kind of building for the demand of the future, because they're not all currently utilised. And we've got one of the biggest solar PV arrays. It's a solar farm on the roof, basically. There's no other way to describe it. And that's powering the asset. So we've tried to ensure, and this is something else we're always doing, any decision we take as a council, we have carbon considerations at the top table. So you normally have your finance, your procurement, your legal, all those standard, what would you consider when making a decision? And now at that top table, and rightly so, we have carbon and environmental considerations as well. So anything we do in the city, we have to know the impact. Doesn't mean to say we're not going to do it, but we'd absolutely then be able to offset it and deliver that offsetting. So something like a car park space is exactly that. From a transport perspective, it's it's a huge challenge because those EVs have got to become affordable. We need to have the ability to people who need those vehicles to use them. Public transport's obviously our priority. That did take a little bit of a hit through COVID, if I'm honest, Callum. So there was a nervousness for obvious reasons. And that's now back to getting back up to where it needs to be, albeit people are still settling in with new habits and new ways of operating, whether hybrid working or other. So we're just ensuring any changes we make will have the desired impact on people being able to use the tram, access the train station into Nottingham, cycle or walk where appropriate, e-scooter where appropriate, and all those changes, that kind of evolution, that move to something new, takes time to bed into that city centre environment. But it's having a good impact. Air quality, we're monitoring very closely. So obviously we're looking at CO2 in particular, but then we are looking at air quality, and obviously transport is the biggest contributor to that. So really, really key that we tackle that in the right way, and we report that through our CM28 board as well. So by no means are we there, but I think we are taking the strides, and where we can't move because of financial issues, or we've just not got the EVs on, the uptake of EVs isn't where it needs to be, then we take that lobbying position, say as a city we've set an ambition that's far ahead of the government's position for the country, which is fine, but actually enable us to do that because we think we've got the solutions to deliver, and cities are going to be key to this, and making that happen across the UK.
As well as the electrification, and obviously you're investing heavily in public transport, are you hoping that there's still a fair bit of less traffic aside from the public transport going to go into, you can see less traffic going into Nottingham?
Yeah, I think so, and it's a balancing act, I guess, with economic regeneration as well. So, and again, this is something else we play out in the planning forum, and we now have a CN28 carbon neutral 2028 pre-planning panel, which is made up of experts across the city, universities, others, who sit on that panel and almost give scrutiny to any decisions we take. And we want the city to thrive, so we can't obviously cut off those journeys that make it thrive, but equally we've got to make sure there's options for people to take that bring them into the city. So I think it's from our perspective is trying to move the policy in the right way, not making any knee-jerk decisions, and monitoring very closely the data that's telling us, yeah, you're going in the right direction, or the data can always say, no, you need to do something different. There's more cars on the road than we want to see. We're still the only, and this is terrific, the only place to have a workplace parking levy. And that's really about generates huge sums of funding that go back into the tram and other sustainable transport options. And he's trying to encourage people to think about different ways of travelling, because obviously there's a levy there, and that is paid into the city council.
Who pays for the levy? How does it work?
So workplace parking levy, and my transport colleagues would share in much greater detail, but it's essentially, it is what it says on the tin, really. If you come into park in the city centre, there's a charge for those businesses who have those spaces, and that comes back into the council and is utilised for, as I say, the tram and others. So it works quite effectively, but it can be quite contentious, because obviously people don't want to discourage businesses in the city, and thankfully that's the big barrier. And thankfully we've found that that's not happened in Nottingham. In fact, quite the counter. What we're seeing is businesses who have sustainability at their heart, or who want to be more sustainable, are really embracing it. And again, something we think we can turn the tide on is, or see as an opportunity, is Nottingham being a real hub for those businesses who work in that low carbon economy space, and that workplace parking levy is part of that. So actually they'll embrace it if they see the bigger picture. Then the communication, etc., is really key on that.
It seems curious to me that it has had a fair bit of press attention, that particular levy, because it was so wide and a really good, ambitious project. Why is it, do you think, that other cities have not taken that up?
Yeah, I think it literally is that. I think there's some fear around the scale of the implementation. So you've got to have the the ambition to do it, and you've got to have the kind of local political support to do it, which might not be the case. I think that there is that fear. So are we going to push businesses away? Are we going to kind of impact how the city can thrive, the economic impacts, etc. And I think by and large the answer is no. Look, that's not going to happen. Other cities are looking at it and they're coming to us for support on that, Caroline. So by and large they would, the answer is no. People will accept and acknowledge, but of course up front they may say no, we don't want to see that for again, all the obvious reasons of not wanting to pay out. So I think it's just around taking that leap of faith and having that leadership to say, no, look, this is the right thing to do. And actually it gives an investment pot that can then go into making other choices for those staff, or whoever it may be, to get into the city much easier, more straightforward, and hopefully work better. So that's the key. That's the big message, is this will make other options much easier.
Yeah, and I can imagine we are going to get to a point where businesses are going to want to sell their green credentials to future employees and their customers. And this is a great way of them saying, well, actually, we put money into the public transport within our city. I think you've come at the right time, and I think other cities should be looking at anything that brings all those things together. It seems like a really good project. That's working.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those. It's one of the facets of, and I'm sure listeners will be familiar with it, but the Kate Raworth donut economics principles, and you kind of look at the different slices of that those kind of principles, and it just takes you a step back from everything being financial prosperity, and actually a prosperous city is built on not just finances, but a whole donut of different components, and that kind of approach where you say, look, people are going to contribute, but actually look at the impact that this can have, and the impact's really important. So the council's got to deliver, and its partners have got to deliver on making that happen. But actually, if the impact is delivered, then it makes that just so sensible, and it's just getting those messages. I think it's taking people on that journey to understand what the future can look like from a city perspective.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned buildings a bit earlier, and retrofit is one of the many things that you're obviously having to approach. Is that more of a difficult area for decarbonisation, because buildings are all so very different? How are you grappling with that problematic area?
Yeah. Really, really challenging. So the first thing you've got to understand from a retrofit angle is the properties you've got. So typically in Nottingham, we've got around 10 archetypes of property, and they, as you can imagine, the older ones and tend to be the leakier ones, or the hardest to treat. So you need a deep retrofit model there. But then some properties may have, so for instance, we've got 6,000 solar PV installations. I've got 5,000 properties on the district heating network. So some of those, they may need a lighter touch from a retrofit perspective to get them up to standard. So understanding the housing stock across the city is really key. But then delivering on that retrofit is challenging. So those hardest to treat properties, you could spend, and we've spent or seen spend of up to £70,000 per property to get it to a standard that we need it to be, which is unsustainable. And the only way we can do it from a council perspective is to bring in government grant to do that, which we are doing: Green Homes grants, Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, Sustainable Warmth Competition. The list of names and acronyms goes on. So we're bringing a lot of grant in the city to make that happen, but it is challenging. What we need to do is have a consistency and a long-term, yes, it's going to happen. So all those names I just mentioned, the government funding regimes, they've got short timelines. And so the market, the supply chains never mature, never bring prices down, because they've got no guarantee that it's going to carry on. So if we say, no, look, this is for the long term, this is going to carry on, the funding is going to continue to come in, straight away you'd see prices drop and reduce. And I think that's a big message that we've given back to government, to say, look, that's what needs to happen. We need a consistency to enable the market prices to shift in the right way. But what you would get to, Caroline, if you got those prices in half or slightly less than half, you get to a place where it made sense to invest because you get a payback. Your energy bills would be down. If it's a housing association property, actually the cost of maintenance would come right down because you could deliver that deep retrofit up front and not have to do anything else for another 25 years because all your interventions would have warranties and it'd be sustainable long term. Whereas what we do at the moment, which is typical maintenance, roof replacement, whatever, insulate, whatever it may be, windows, all kind of spaced out. If you do it up front, you can make big savings. And obviously the impact on carbon is huge. But what we're finding is where we're delivering this, and we're delivering thousands, and we've got a pipeline of, as I say, quite a significant number still to go. What we're finding is, as I mentioned at the start, health's improved. People have a pride of place. So if their properties are improved, then it's a kind of, I'm going to improve my garden, and there's a neighbourhood feel that's much more advantageous. The look of the properties is improved. So all those things we probably don't consider in the business case at the outset. We get all these added benefits that come along. And what we've got to do is ensure we have the model across private housing, rented, and obviously social housing. So we have gone into areas where we've perhaps only had the social housing that we're able to tackle. And what we need to do is make sure we've got a private offer as well. So that's really important. We go into a neighbourhood and do the work while we're there. Makes no sense to do work on certain properties and come back for other properties when a certain funding regime allows. So that's really key as we go in and tackle a whole area as we're doing it. But yeah, the successes are great. Hugely challenging, tens of thousands of properties to go. But when you get it right and you see the successes and you're putting in air source heat pumps that really work well, and the testimonials from the residents are fantastic, and it's great to see. And it is ramping up, but it is a hugely challenging area, particularly as people work from home more, and obviously there's been a kind of shift in how people do perceive the home if it's hybrid working. So we're having to really manage those emissions.
I think that one of the things that you draw out there is that if you can get this investment, the long term is so much better. And I guess that's across everything that we do in society, isn't it? If we're firefighting all the time, we just keep after firefighting. But if we actually take the time and make it right, we don't have to worry about it for quite a long time. That is the challenge you face, I imagine, on a daily basis.
yeah, absolutely. And its prices, when you look at those costs, and that's because contractors, the supply chain, it's unfamiliar territory. But actually, if we make it the mainstream and say, look, we're going to do, and the model's brilliant. So we external wall insulation, solar PV, air source heat pumps. We have often an energy unit per, say, 20 properties. That means if you're generating solar down the street and they're not using it, up the street they need the power, they can use it. So just those energy flows, reducing the demand on grid, smart monitors so people can see exactly what they're using in a really intuitive way. Not this, and again, smart meters are another issue, aren't you? A different smart meter depending on who your utility provider. That's kind of out of the, we go with a smart monitor that's fit for all, and we'll digest that information and give so all that kind of model. It's great. The residents love it. It's an improved look, big impact. And of course, there's a cost there, but those costs can come down. It's much like solar PV, Caroline. So solar PV benefited from the feed-in tariff subsidy, which made it viable for people to deliver solar PV. They get a payback in about 4 or 5 years, roughly, on a 3 kilowatt peak system for through the feed-in tariff regime. But costs stayed high. Now, when the subsidy ultimately was pulled, there was a fear, and the cost of solar PV stayed high for a little while, but the market followed ultimately because the technology was proven, and the cost of solar PV now is down to where you don't need subsidy, and you'd still, given current electricity prices, get a payback on your investment in 4 or 5 years. So suddenly, if you're staying in a property for anything longer, it makes sense to take that approach. And that's really key for me, that we absolutely need subsidy up front to prove a technology. Once it's proven, it can drop away and the market will follow. And retrofit's the same. That whole retrofit approach is really, really key.
And can you see the acceleration within communities Because it is one of, especially something like solar PV. Oh, they've got solar on their roof. Can you see that within Nottingham's communities that is starting to escalate?
Yeah, definitely. People are talking about it, and that's the best way of getting messages out there. And so we've not just done it. So people talk about it on people's homes, and obviously we then get a lot of contact from people who are keen, and we can kind of make that happen if they fit the criteria for whether it's solar PV or retrofit or something different, energy efficiency, external wall insulation. But also what we're doing is where we've got community hubs. So at a number of our leisure centres, we've put solar carports on the car parks. So solar panels on stilts, double use of the site. Cars can park under them. So actually people get it. If it's raining, they get out of the car and they're not getting wet. They get the kids out of the car. So it's kind of dual benefit. But it's a double use of that car park space. So it's a talking point as well. So people come in, see that big solar carport. Oh, this is great. They might speak to someone in the leisure centre, who will say, yeah, this is power in the centre and this is how it works. So that educational piece and people just kind of getting a feel for how these things can work is really, really key.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have this ambitious target that you're obviously all these things are tied into. Where are you currently sitting? We're a few years away. You've got time. She says optimistically.
I know, and we absolutely keep optimistic, and we've purposely, we've gone for that really ambitious target because we were the leading core city. Most of the other core cities are around 2030. They've put a target of 2030 a couple of years later. The very latest data, and this is the interesting thing about this, there's a 2-year lag on the data for, again, lots of obvious reasons about compiling the information. We use government data sets. So the latest data we've had is from 2021, and that's showing us a 58% reduction per capita on our carbon emissions against the 2005 baseline. So we're looking for more and more data. Obviously, we should be getting data early next year that'll tell us how we got on up to 2022. So that's kind of important that we get that information out there. We won't know if we've achieved carbon neutrality in 2028 till 2030. So there's a strange kind of strange angle there. But we are on track. We are on track. But we do need those step changes. So we do need legislative change to help us. We do need technological advancement to help us. So we need to see some big step change in order to achieve it. But absolutely, the city is galvanised to power on towards that really ambitious target. I'd love to be the first city in Europe to achieve that, and we're collaborating. I love putting the competitiveness out there because I think that can help fuel us getting there. But we are working with all our core city partners. We're on the Carbon Disclosure Project A list, so the international A list for cities, and I think there's only 120 cities on there. So for Nottingham to be there is truly remarkable and really, really positive. And that's all based on around what you're doing and how you're delivering and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, lots of recognition, lots of collaboration and acceptance that it's hugely challenging, but a real pleasure and a kind of get a little bit of time to reflect that we've hit that 58% target, that 58% figure, a long way to go, but we all keep galvanized that we can achieve it.
It sounds, as I wrap this up, it sounds like you are really focused and you're really hopeful. Are your thoughts and feelings around climate change and sustainability in the environment generally as a positive? You feel positive about it? Where do you see, we're looking at 2030, but where do you see it's got beyond 2030, 2050? What are your thoughts and feelings of a future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always try to be positive, Caroline. Obviously, we do see kind of some of the negative headlines, some of the big issues. For me, I just think this is absolutely the right, whatever kind of people's kind of political thoughts, etc., etc. This is absolutely the way that we've got to go. The benefits of moving and having cleaner air, of warmer homes, of you look at some of the big issues recently around energy costs, preventing being reliant on kind of providers, being more locally resilient to things like energy costs, having that green space that people can encounter. For me, there's just so many advantages, and I think generally the public buy into that I'm positive about this, that people will see it's the right direction to go, and it can be in harmony with economic regeneration, with new buildings. You know, done in the right way, this can work really well, and it can be a case of, you know, as I mentioned, and really key for me, it can be a case of not limiting options, but people just being able to take the sustainable choice, and ensuring business and others come on board with that and realise that's what people expect. So yeah, ever positive, Caroline, and you know, the things we're delivering, we always encourage people to come into Nottingham, give us their feedback, and let us know what they think.
Marvellous. Wayne, you've got a job on your hands, but I absolutely look forward to hearing more about it. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to what's going on in Nottingham, and I wish you all the success in the future.
Thanks, Caroline. Real pleasure. Take care.
Hearing from Wayne about Nottingham's approach to attaining their ambitious 2028 carbon neutral target was illuminating and hopeful. In addition to having a plan, there are plenty of projects on the go, covering transport, buildings and energy generation. I got a real sense of reach into all aspects of everyday life within the city, and it was great to hear how they are collaborating with other community stakeholders. Making big societal changes requires everyone to be part of the transition. You can find a link to the carbon neutral plan in the show notes. In producing this episode, I'd like to thank Andy Shaw for audio editing, Jeremy Jones for providing the music, and to you for listening. Don't forget you can follow the podcast to get automatic access to each new episode. And it would be lovely if you could rate, review and share it too. It really helps. Until next time, bye for now.